Bhagati Tamashuki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Nigama Kapaturitam Panam Shukamakaram Javisamitam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamariam Mahoda Horisikabuham Krishna Sadam Bhagade Damagani Karuna Stadvishamasha Padana Kodinodidaham Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhikanta Namostude Jayatam Surgari Tango Mama Midir Matergati Matsava Shaparam Boja Radha Madana Mohano Sriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsi Vada Karsan Vinashana Gopanata Studiyasanam Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpa Drumada Srimad Ratnagara Shima Shanashto Shri Sri Radha Shila Govindadevo Prestila Bihe Sevimanashmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanitaya Chajagaritaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Daja Mangalam Pandiri Kaksho Mangalaya Hari Om Narayanaya Vitmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodayate Om Mahadevi Vidmahi Vishnu Padnaka Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodayate Mahalakshmi Namastuvyam Namastuvyam Sare Sare Hari Priya Namastuvyam Namastuvya Deyade Taptakanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavana Sute Devi Pranamani Hari Priya Subham Karoti Kalyanam Arogyam Satam Buddhi Vinasana Deepa Jyoti Namostute Om Ganati Maranda Sangananga Saraka Chaksurin Militam Yana Tashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparadikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamaram Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sta Sri Rupam Sagadatam Stahagana Ragadatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishikan Vitam Sta Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasnaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamanaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pachadine Nirvishes Sunyavadi Paskata De Sadhani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Happy Wednesday morning, which is Radhastami 2024, 2 weeks ago, also on a Monday, which was August 26th. We celebrated the appearance day of Lord Krishna, which is called Janmastami, the birth of Lord Krishna. 2 weeks after the birth of Lord Krishna, Radharani made her appearance. She's 2 weeks younger than Krishna. So this is Radhastami. We get a key to the importance of this particular day and this particular personality. Radha is the girl with Krishna. She's always on the left-hand side of Krishna. And she's called Ladhani, the pleasure potency of Krishna. Krishna is one. It is said he existed before the sun, the moon, and the stars. The first expansion of Krishna was Srimati Radharani. The one become two, then Srimati Radharani is turned totally towards Krishna. She's the number one servant, the number one associate, the number one eternal consort of the Lord. And so there's a saying that the one has become two, and then the two have turned around and become one again. The key to understanding the importance of Radharani is given in this verse in the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavad Jivanchavi Bhagavatangareno Namartya Bilabedhyas tu Sri Vishnu Padu Manujas Tulasha Shashanchavo Yashtu Navedikadam. It calls a person who has never taken the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee. Now, it doesn't say take the dust of the feet of the Lord. It says one who has never taken the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee of the Lord. This kind of indicates that we shouldn't aspire to directly take the dust from the lotus feet of the Lord. That's too presumptuous, too pretentious. The process, Krishna prescribes in the Bhagavad Gita the method by which we attain success in spiritual life. And that is not by going directly to Krishna, not by taking directly from Krishna's lotus feet the dust, but getting the dust from the feet of a devotee of Krishna. This points us in the way of proper mood of humility in which to be eligible for the mercy of the Lord. We've been talking about this in connection with the Gajendra Leela, how it is that one cannot, however great a scholar one is, however great a yogi one is, however much one knows the scripture, however much one donates, one cannot on one's own come face to face with the Supreme Personality of God. It is only by the mercy of God that he reveals himself to his devotee. Atapi te deva padambu jabaya pashalalashana janati tadbambangana chanyue go bichanin vichinvan. Only one who has received the dust on his feet, on his head, can attain the mercy of the Lord. But it's not the dust directly from Krishna's feet. It's the dust from the feet of a devotee. So here comes Radharani. Radharani is the number one devotee of Krishna, and all others who have been successful in their devotion have channeled their devotion through Radharani to Krishna, not directly. Krishna says, whosoever describes themselves directly as my devotee is not my devotee. Rather, who is a devotee of my devotee is my devotee. Radharani is the channel, the path, the highway back to home, back to God. You cannot attain the mercy of Krishna by ignoring or bypassing Radharani. Krishna is the property of his pure devotees. And only if the pure devotee agrees to give Krishna can one attain him. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we hear the story of Raghunath Das Goswami, highly educated. His father and uncle were two of the richest men in the world at that time. They controlled the taxes, the duties for all goods coming into the port there near Calcutta from all over the world. They would get a small percentage. Whatever goods were unloaded, import, export. They were worth millions and millions of rupees, even in that day and age. He was their nephew. He was the son and the nephew. He had everything. He was literally born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And so he would get word that Lord Chaitanya was going to be in a certain place at a certain time. And he would travel there. But in every case, he arrived just after Lord Chaitanya and say, he would say, is Lord Chaitanya coming? They say, no, you just missed him. He just left. And this happened over and over and over and over again. But finally, there was a instance where failing several times to meet Lord Chaitanya, Raghunath Goswami heard that Nityananda was going to be at a certain place at a certain time in Bengal. So he went and he was successful in meeting Lord Nityananda. So he bowed down, he took the dust of Lord Nityananda's feet on his head, and he asked, what can I do? Nityananda said, you can you're a rich man. So buy all kinds of edibles, both cooked and uncooked, in the marketplace, and arrange for them to be distributed to the Brahmins. Hundreds and hundreds of Brahmins came. There was a huge picnic on the bank of the Ganges, sponsored by the wealth of Raghunath Das Goswami. At that time, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in a subtle form and sat with Nityananda. It reminded one of Krishna and Balaram sitting amongst the cowherd boys, picnicking on the bank of the Yamuna River. However, nobody could see Lord Chaitanya except Nityananda, and by the grace of Nityananda, Raghunath Das Goswami. This is the first time that he was able to see Lord Chaitanya. He'd went to meet Lord Chaitanya physically on many occasions, but was thwarted. Now, in the presence of Lord Chaitanya's devotee, Nityananda, and having taken the dust from the feet of the devotee on his head, Lord Chaitanya came to him. He had tried to go to Lord Chaitanya unsuccessfully on multiple occasions. But when he got the dust from the feet of a devotee, Lord Chaitanya came to him. Of all the hundreds of devotees and Brahmins who were present there, only Nityananda and Raghunath Das Goswami could see Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda were very playfully feeding each other. One would open his mouth and the other would put some chipped rice in the mouth, and then the other would open his mouth and the other would put chipped rice in his mouth. And Lord Nityananda defined and described the situation by saying that prior to going through Nityananda, Raghunath had been trying to go directly to Lord Chaitanya, and Nityananda called him a thief. He said, "You're a thief, and I must punish you." Why a thief? Because Chaitanya is the property of Nityananda. The Lord is the property of his devotees. The devotees own the Lord, and only if the devotees decide to give the darshan of the Lord can the Lord be seen. Nityananda called Raghunath Das Goswami a thief. But once Raghunath Das Goswami complied with the order of Lord Nityananda and took the dust from lotus feet of Nityananda on his head, then Lord Nityananda essentially released Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so that Raghunath Das Goswami became a pure devotee. He could see the Lord. Now, this verse, which we quoted, says that anyone who has not received the dust from the lotus feet of a devotee on his head is a dead body, although breathing. This term, dead breathing body, refers to ghostly existence. Sometimes people commit suicide. They experience so much misery from the frustration of their gross body to fulfill their desires to give them happiness. They think, I will end my gross body, I will destroy the gross body, and then I'll destroy the source of all my troubles. But the problem is, the body is not the source of your troubles. Your inner spirit, your inner mental, psychic mentality, your mindset is the source of your troubles. You're misdirected, trying to get pleasure out of this material body, like a thirsty man tries to get water from a mirage, looking for spiritual satisfaction, happiness in the wrong place. Now, naturally, embodied living beings in this material world live in a state of frustration unless and until they become Krishna conscious. So being frustrated, sometimes someone thinks they'll solve their problem, they'll put themselves out of their misery, so to speak, by committing suicide. But it doesn't solve the problem at all because the desires are still there. It makes the problem even worse. Because at least with the gross body, it had some channel, some limited means by which they could pursue the phantasmagoria of happiness through sense gratification. They think they're going to solve the problem by doing away with the body, but they make the problem worse. After suicide, they are a dead body breathing. They're a ghost. They become a ghost after suicide. The desires are still there. The desires didn't go away when you divested yourself of the body. The desires are still there. What you did do was you denied yourself what limited ability you had to enjoy through the body. So even though with a body you're frustrated in terms of drinking, in terms of seeing, in terms of tasting, in terms of smelling, in terms of testing, you were frustrated because you couldn't do it to the extent that you liked. And the more that you did it, the more those desires burned brighter. Now you can't do anything. You don't have a gross body anymore. So your desires are as strong as they ever were, but you have absolutely no means of letting off steam. It's like a pressure cooker that doesn't have a release valve. So the tension, the frustration just builds and builds and builds and builds. And you can imagine what happens in a pressure cooker if there's no outlet, if the steam is not released periodically. There's just going to be a huge, huge compression, and eventually it'll explode in a very destructive way. When you become a ghost, you don't solve your problems, you compound your problems. And that's why ghosts are never happy. Never. Casper the Friendly Ghost is kind of might have worked as a cartoon character, but there's no such thing in real life. And because they don't have a gross body, ghosts very often try to inhabit or to influence those that do have a gross body. Particularly when we get intoxicated, it's described we're vulnerable, particularly vulnerable to a ghost coming in and wreaking his mischief. Misery loves company. So the ghost is without a gross body. So the ghost will often enter another gross body and try to influence that gross body towards death, towards suicide or accident. And then it says misery loves company because it can enjoy a gross body. It's bent and determined to try to deny the most gross bodily enjoyments to others. And that's why when many traffic accidents happen when people are intoxicated, not only are their own faculties impaired when they're driving through intoxication, but on top of that, on top of the impairment of their faculties, their alertness while traveling 70, 80 miles an hour down the road. But on top of that, there's every chance that a ghost can enter into them and cause them to lose attention, to get distracted, to veer over the center line. And when one's intoxicated, one is particularly vulnerable to the influence of ghosts. I think you're getting the idea that ghostly existence is not to be desired, to be avoided at all cases. Another way that one becomes a ghost is through excessive attachments. We often hear about mansions, expensive palatial residences being ghostly haunted. Oftentimes, devotees take advantage of the reputation of such a building. Usually, the property values plummet when a building, a nice palatial building, gets a reputation as being haunted. Oftentimes, it's hard to find buyers for such a place, and devotees will take advantage, be opportunistic, and buy such a place at a fraction of the normal market value. And then we have an infallible means of de-ghosting it. We read the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have kirtan, and there are two sounds that ghosts particularly don't like. When you start a kirtan, you do Gamana Chicha Devanam, Gamana Chicharam, Kurugantaram, Devacham. You make the mudra like a bell, like that, like ringing a bell. Gamana Chicha Devanam, Gamana Chicha. And you indicate, and then you ring the bell in the beginning of a worship ceremony. Ghosts don't like the sound of bells at all. They go away. They can't stand it. And another sound they can't make is, this is the mudra for the conch shell. Krishna's conch shell is called Panchajanya. One chants these various mantras glorifying Krishna's conch shell, Panchajanya. And then one blows the conch shell. Boo, boo, boo. Ghosts can't stand the ringing of the bell. They can't stand the blowing of the conch shell, and they can't stand the chanting of Hare Krishna. Also, devotees generally keep scripture in their homes, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Ghosts can't stand to be near the holy scriptures. So devotees have often in the past taken advantage of the drop in market value of a residence that had been purported to be haunted and then de-haunted it by those various methods. One who has never taken the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee on one's head is like a ghost. It's not a very desirable, peaceful, or satisfactory mode of existence. Bhukti mukti spriha, pisachi, vidibhartate. And the vast majority of the population is said to be haunted by either one of two ghosts, bhukti or mukti. There are two ghosts which pretty much universally haunt anyone who's not a devotee. Bhukti, mukti. Bhukti means sense enjoyment, and mukti means being frustrated and satisfied in your senses. You give it up. The sour grape syndrome. We all heard about the fox. He saw some grapes and they looked good. He jumped up to try and get some grapes, but he couldn't quite jump high enough. Finally, when he realized that he couldn't get to the height at which the grapes were, he walked away and he said the grapes are probably sour anyway. People try to get happiness through indulging their tongue, their eyes, their nose, their ears, their sense of touch, feeling nice things, speaking nice things, hearing nice things, seeing nice things, tasting nice things, smelling nice aromas. This is compared to a haunted mode of existence. However much one indulges the senses, not only will not be satisfied, but they'll blaze up even more brightly. You might think fire is extinguished by liquids. Generally speaking, a liquid will extinguish the fire. So therefore, you'll bring a gallon of gasoline, you pour it on the fire blazes up twice as bright. You say, what's going on there? This is a liquid, this is a fire. Generally speaking, liquids extinguish fire. Why is it that when I poured this liquid on the fire, it didn't extinguish, but it blazed up twice? Because it's gasoline. It doesn't quell the fire. It agitates the fire. So indulgence in sense gratification, nobody in the history of the world ever became happy by indulging in sense gratification. They just became more and more restless and more agitated. This is the first ghost that haunts everyone. People are preoccupied day and night how to get sense gratification, how to eat something nice, how to, after you eat and your belly's full and you're feeling a little sluggish, and how to see something nice, turn on the TV and watch a football game or something like that. And then after your eyes and you get a headache from watching TV, then you want to go and drink something. Or maybe you want to take some intoxication, or maybe you want to go to a club and hear some music, or maybe you want to touch the soft skin of the opposite sex. And you go from one to the other, and you indulge one of the senses for a period of time, like you eat, and then you get uncomfortable. You think, if I could just eat a good meal, I'd be happy. And you take the first bite, it's so satisfying. The second bite, third bite, and the more you eat, the more your hunger goes away. You're no longer bothered by hunger. But then you reach a certain point where you should stop eating, but you can't. You can't. You continue eating beyond the time it's prudent to do so. Then you get a pushing in your belly, and you start to feel sluggish, and you start to feel bad. Then you go out and you exercise, and you run and exercise, and then you get tired of exercise. Then you want to take some intoxicants. Then you want to go to the club. And each time we look towards the next thing, the next thing's going to be it, like a donkey, thinking, if I just take 2 more steps, I'll get to the carrot that's dangling in front of me. And in this way, we pass the very brief period of our human form of life in the vain pursuit of sense gratification, just like a ghost works fruitlessly. There's no way that the ghost can benefit himself, because he's already given up his gross body. One who is after bhukti, sense gratification, is compared to someone who's ghostly haunted. After a while, some sense may come to his head and realize, I'm on a treadmill. Not only am I not getting satisfied, but I'm getting more agitated. At that point, one may try for renunciation, to give it up. That's called mukti. One wants freedom from all the pushings and pullings, agitations, and the burning, lusty, greed, anger, which comes from trying to indulge one's senses. But one can only do that for so long before one gets bored. We see people of means, people who make a lot of money in the city during the week. They work Monday through Friday, and they literally accumulate money hand over fist. It's like it was growing in trees. But they don't want to stay in the city on Saturday and Sunday. They go to the country. They have a nice country house where there's trees and fresher air and birds, waters, and recreational activities. So they work for enjoyment, for money during the week, but then they want to give it up. They want to break from that treadmill, and they go to the country during the weekend. So this is raga dvesha. This is attachment Monday through Friday, and detachment Saturday and Sunday. At Friday afternoon, they can't wait to get out to the country. And on Sunday night, they can't wait to get back in the city. This is called duality. Krishna says only those who are free from these 2 ghostly hauntings of attachment and aversion can attain the mercy of the Lord. A third category of living being, aside from those who covet sense gratification, and aside from those who try to reject sense gratification, are the devotees of the Lord who neither covet nor reject the things of this world, who neither favor nor detest their senses, but who see everything as the properties of the Lord and use their God-given senses to engage all the stuff of this world in the service of the Lord. Devotees don't see in terms of good and bad, hot and cold, honor and dishonor. They see only in terms of what will benefit the Lord. This is the Lord's property. This computer is the Lord's property. This house is the Lord's property. This land is the Lord's property. This radio station is the Lord's property. This temple is the Lord's property. This kitchen is the Lord's property. How can I use it in order to honor the Lord best? The devotee puts oneself in a separate category apart from the dualities of this material world. Krishna Bhakti, Niskama Taiva Shanta, Bhukti Mukti, Siddhi Kamati Sakadya Shanta. Yogis, Gyanis, ascetics, even religious people, charitable people, philanthropists, they all are haunted to one degree or another by Bhukti and Mukti. And so therefore they act either in attachment or they act in a false sense of renunciation, and they continue to revolve in the cycle of birth and death in the material world. They cannot extricate themselves. They get further and further attached, whether they go this way or that way. The end result is more and more and more attachment. Whereas a devotee doesn't have to run after the things of this material world, covet them, nor is he repulsed, nor is he averse to the things of this material world. They're just things. They're just things, that's all, and they belong to God. So with a spirit neither of attachment nor of aversion, but a spirit of devotion, one uses the things of this world in the service of the Lord. And the best way to do that, the most effective way to do that, is to follow the example of the great spiritual masters, those who have done the same in the past. We follow in their footsteps. So we seek out for fulfillment and satisfaction. And in order to find that middle way, that path of bhakti, which burns out both the results of it over attachment and the results of over aversion, and we find the middle path of bhakti, which has already been trodden by the great saints and sages. Maharaj Rahugana, in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, asked the great sage Jarat Bharat how the sage had attained such a liberated stage of a Paramahamsa. Paramahamsa is a swan-like devotee who has extracted the essence from life. Sane, sober, objective, has prioritized the responsibilities of this human form of life, streamlined one's life in such a way as not to get distracted. What was Jad Bharat's secret to focusing on the absolute truth? And in answer to this question by the king, Jad Bharat tells him that the perfectional stage of life, the Paramahamsa stage of life, cannot be attained unless one attains, same as the verse we read, unless one is blessed by the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees. To further clarify, Jad Bharat says it is never attained by tapasya, austerity. It's never attained even by worship. It is never attained by the renounced order of life. It is never attained by the discharge of one's household or duties, not by the chanting of Vedic hymns, nor by the performance of penances in the hot sun with cold water or before the blazing fire. In other words, Krishna is the property of his pure devotees headed up by Radharani, and therefore ultimately only Radharani can deliver Krishna to the devotee. Krishna is never attainable by direct. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya himself, who is Krishna in his devotional incarnation, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna acting as a devotee. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna showing us how to position ourselves to attain the mercy of Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya described himself in an exemplary Gopi Bharta Parakamadar Dasano 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 Das. Lord Chaitanya Prabhu did not describe himself as a servant of Krishna directly, but he described himself as a servant of 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 a servant, many, many times over as a servant of the Lord.
Only such a person can become free from being ghostly haunted by the desire to enjoy or by the false sense of renunciation. The Lord is never to be found, even if one becomes Vedashu Durabam Adilam Atma Bhakto, however great a scholar in the Vedic literatures one can become. It's very difficult for such a scholar to approach the devotee, the Lord. However, anyone, even if they're not a scholar, even if they're not highly intelligent, even if they're not well-born, can can approach the Lord through his pure devotees. Therefore, if you go to the place of Krishna, if you go to Vrindavan, that very place where Krishna had vented himself and exhibited his childhood pastimes 53 centuries ago, curiously enough, people very rarely greet each other by saying Hare Krishna. You might wonder at that. This is the land of Krishna. This is this place that's special to Krishna. This is, in fact, the spiritual world descended in this material world. It's a replica of Krishna's self-same abode, created from his own internal potency. Why aren't people saying Hare Krishna? They're saying Radhe Radhe instead. Everyone in Vrindavan says Radhe Radhe, recognizing that unless you get the mercy of Radha, you're not going to get the mercy of Krishna. Now, Radha is very tender-hearted, very kind. She feels for the suffering and the struggles of the living beings in this material world. So once you get yourself directed in the right direction, not to Krishna on your left, but to Radha on your right as you face the altar, and you focus on the dust from Radha's feet and the dust from the feet of the representatives of the disciplic succession descending through the ages to the present time, then you're going to be successful. Radha is very much inclined. If you serve Radha or any of the servants of Radha, Radha is only too ready and willing to turn to Krishna, on her right-hand side and say, Krishna, just as an example, Radha has a flower in her hand. Well, let's say you gave that flower to a servant of Radha, who gave it to a servant of Radha, who gave another servant of Radha, and eventually that flower came into Radha's hand. Then Radha is going to take that flower. She's going to turn to Krishna and say, Krishna, Charudas gives you this flower. This flower is coming from Charudas. It's very easy. Radha is only too willing. That's her job, is to introduce Krishna to spirit souls who have found their niche in the chain of disciplic succession. Krishna misses us. He created each one of us unique and individual. There are no two souls the same. There's something that we bring to the loving relationship between ourselves and Krishna that no other soul can offer. So the whole process of becoming Krishna conscious just involves doing your small part, taking the first steps in the right direction, not to material sense gratification, not to Krishna's indirect energy, either in a mood of enjoyment and false proprietorship, nor in a mood of artificial renunciation, but using everything in this creation as in the service of Krishna, according to the direction of pure devotees. Just do that simple thing, starting with the tongue. The greatest asset we have, for good or for evil, is the tongue. Tongue has the potential to eat so much garbage food, including flesh and fish and poultry, and accrue for the eater so many future lifetimes in the births of animals. The tongue has the downward potential to speak ill of others, to criticize others, to gossip about others, which never yields the speaker a good result. But that same tongue has the potential, if you eat pure foods, vegetarian, flesh-free foods, which are offered to the Lord, and you speak only positive words about the Lord and one's devotees, that same tongue, which can drag you down to hellish conditions, will take you back to home, back to God. Someone once compared the tongue to the rudder of a ship. You have a huge ship in Long Beach, yeah, in Los Angeles. They have the Queen Mary, I'm not sure whether it still hosts people or goes on cruises. I think it's dry docked, but they may still have, I think they have catered events, weddings and all on board, but it no longer goes onto the ocean. However, at one time it did. This huge ship. Nowadays, cruise ships are much bigger, but in its day, the Queen Mary was the biggest thing going. So this huge ship was controlled just by a rudder. And the rudder is just controlled by a wheel in the captain's cabin. So when the wheel turns this way, then gradually over the course of a half a mile, the ship goes in a wet port. And when the wheel is turned this way, takes a half a mile or so to make the turn, goes to the starboard. The whole ship, which contains running tracks, multiple swimming pools, shuffle courts, 5 different restaurants, nightclubs, any number of cabins and accommodations, is controlled just by a little wheel, which is connected to a little rudder. So similarly, our future is controlled by this little thing, this little flap of flesh inside of our mouth called the tongue. Depending on how we use the tongue, we create for ourselves either joys or fears in the future. So when we dedicate the tongue, it has 2 functions, to eat and to vibrate, to eat and to speak. So when those 2 functions are dovetailed in the service of the Lord, that means to say we eat only vegetarian food, which is offered to the Lord, and we speak only the glorifications of the Lord, then that tongue will chart for us a course back to home, back to Godhead. The first thing we need to do is recognize that Krishna is not the property of the ascetics, not the property of the yogis, not the property of the intellectuals, not even the property of the church-going, pious, righteous people, but he's the property of the devotees, headed up by Srimati Radharani. Essentially, on this day of Radhastami and every other day of the year for that matter, we worship Radha because without Radha's mercy, we'll never get to Krishna. And Radha is, again, as I said, she's only too willing to extend her mercy, her grace. She's only too willing to illuminate and to clear the obstacles for us so that we can go back to home, back to Godhead. All we have to do is indicate our willingness by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and assisting the great souls whose mission it is to bring everybody out of the blazing fire of material existence, to bring them out from the ghostly, haunted, miserable mentality of trying to enjoy or alternatively reject this material world up to the objective standard, the solid platform, the ultimate reality of unmotivated, unconditional devotional service to the Lord of Radharani, Sri Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in this connection, we'll be fasting throughout the day. Here in Spanish Fork, I suppose the devotees are having the morning program right now, doing a class in Radharani. We'll also do a Radharani class this evening from 6 to 6:45. We'll have that time directed towards Radharani. But the big observance will be in Salt Lake City. It starts at 6 o'clock. I know Agni and Krishna Prasad will be going up to Salt Lake City to lead the chanting and to lead the discussion on Radharani. So if you're from Salt Lake City, we encourage you to attend the temple function from 6 o'clock until 7:30 or so. If you're local in Spanish Fork, come join us for Arti this evening. And a reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita about the glories of Radharani afterwards. Okie dokie. We didn't have Rob join us this morning, but we do have our poet preeminent, Brent Spencer. One of the things he wrote this morning was, nobody ever became happy by satisfying the senses. So then they do some austerities and put up some fences. They eventually get bored of the duality, engage their senses in the practice and formality of the devotional service of a pure devotee like Srimati Radharani. It's getting pretty good with those alliterations there. Nobody ever became happy by satisfying the senses. So then they do some austerities and put up some fences. They eventually get bored of the duality and engage their senses in the practice and formality of the devotional service of pure devotee like Radharani. Here's a little something more. For the Lord to see, you must first get the dust on your head from the feet of a pure devotee. You can approach Krishna through Srimati Radharani. Short and sweet. For the Lord to see, you must first get the dust on your head from the feet of a pure devotee. You can approach Krishna through Srimati Radharani. Thank you, Brent, and thank you, Geeta Shah. We became Facebook friends yesterday. Geeta Shah weighs in with a Radhe Radhe. Lilavati, Hare Krishna. Vaibhavi wishes one and all a happy Radhastami. Natasha joined us this morning. Thank you so much, Natasha. And Sundari Priya also weighs in on the comment section of Facebook with a Radhe Radhe. So take advantage of this most holy second or even perhaps the most holy day of the year to think about Krishna, fast to the amount that you're able to, even as much as up until 6 o'clock if possible, at least until noon. Try to read something about Radharani. Greet people, Radhe Radhe, today at least, instead of Hari Bol or Hari Krishna. And take your 16 rounds and do more. Do more rounds on this special day because they'll have, their potency will be multiplied. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.